Hello, class. Hope you're doing well. I want to talk a little bit about the lottery, which may be one of the stranger stories you've ever had to read. It is certainly a grisly and unexpected ending for those of you who are able to pick up on the fact that it involves a woman being stoned to death. Now, why would I ask you to read such a thing? Um, I have selected this story. Really, all of the works that we have done this semester have been selected for their impact. These are all examples of writing that show you the power and potency of the written word and the different ways in which you can use that potency, and you can sculpt a text to send a message based on your opinions or attitudes of the time. And of course, we're writing essays, and that's one form of communication, formal expression and formal writing. But there are also other ways that we can use words to get our point across, and literature is one of the great ways to do that. So the key to understanding any work of literature is understanding the context of the time in which it was produced. The Lottery was released in the New Yorker. It was a short story published in the New Yorker in, I believe, 1948. Might be 49. It was the late 40s. And so in order to understand the story and the meaning of the story, we have to understand the context of the time. What was going on in 1948? Well, to put it simply, that was the end of World War II around that time. And World War II had been a really bloody struggle, very costly, very emotionally draining, and terror inspiring, with the advent of the atomic bomb and all of this other stuff, and the Holocaust and the things that had happened. And so people were feeling a sense of relief, and they were also feeling, in the United States, a sense of victory, right? The United States was one of several powers that came out on top in World War II. And so the feeling was generally that we were happy we won, but also that our victory must have been divinely inspired, or it must have occurred because our ideas were innately better, or whatever. This is a concept called American exceptionalism, with an E. And American exceptionalism is an idea that has taken hold in our society in a lot of different ways. It's the idea that the things that we do are innately better because our society is founded on these Enlightenment values, and these values make it to where our society is more resilient than others, and we tend to win these types of conflicts and things like that. And you can see this manifest in lots of different ways today. And it was a very popular idea at the time, and there may be some truth to that idea. You know, there may be some truth to the notion that the Enlightenment values and stuff have made our society better. I think a lot of people would agree with that statement. But at the same time, I think it can be easy to get caught up in that idea to such an extent that you sort of fail to see your own flaws. You fail to see your own faults. And this is very much the case that the United States found itself in. We were very high off of the war, and also very tired from it, and we wanted to write the narrative in a way that made us come out on top. So Shirley Jackson is a author at the time, and she's living in a small town, and she's married to a Jewish man, and they experienced a lot of prejudice because of his ethnicity. And so she knew that the small town America was susceptible to the exact same type of thinking that started the Holocaust. We know that what is the Holocaust is based on anti-Semitism. It was the systemic extermination of the Jewish people on the part of Nazi Germany. And this was not the only crazy thing that was going on at the time, to be fair. There was the communist cleansings that occurred and things like that. There was a lot of death and a lot of power upheaval, and different forces vying for control and things like that. And so we kind of thought that we were immune to it, that there was something about us that was special, that kept us from being subjected to these types of movements and the things that had happened in Europe and in other places. But Shirley Jackson knew firsthand, because of the racial prejudice that she experienced, the hatred towards her husband, she knew that this wasn't the case, that the same manner of thinking that could lead to any number of these catastrophes was present in the American people and in the American population. Also, think about the context of the story being in a small town. A small town is, everybody knows everybody. There are no secrets. We have this kind of familial, sort of friendly vibe. And yet here are these people in this story, and they're practicing this barbaric ritual. And it is a ritual. If you recall, Old Man Warner says, lottery in June, corn heavy soon. It is a human sacrifice for the purpose of making the corn grow larger. And so you can imagine the people waking up in the morning, enjoying their coffee, reading the New Yorker, and finding this story, and they were quite appalled. This story got a lot of negative responses from people who were just shocked and appalled that such a thing could be published. And the reason they were so angry is because the people in the story resembled them, resembled their lives, and they also displayed this barbaric quality of participating in a human sacrifice. More importantly, the people in the story seem to have no connection to why it is they are participating in this sacrifice. What is the point? Like, what is it? And they talk about how some towns have gotten rid of the lottery and maybe we should move onward towards the lottery. And then, of course, the character Old Man Warner representing the unwillingness to change. There's always been a lottery. He's got to have it the old way. So think about this in the context of your own life. One of the reasons I like for students to read this story is because, believe it or not, there are a lot of ways in which you are like the characters in the story. Now, I'm not suggesting that you're going to stone anyone or that you think human sacrifice is a good idea. That would be a silly thing to suggest. But I guarantee you, if you think about it, you have a lot of the same lack of awareness for the traditions that you have inherited and their origins. Remember, the people in the story don't even remember why the lottery started. There used to be a ritual, but they don't practice it. We used to use wooden chips. Now we use paper ones. So there's all this like degrading of this tradition, and people don't know why they do the tradition, but they just do it. It's part of their culture, it's part of their society, and they just go through the motions. So think about it. Let me ask you some questions. Why do you carve a gourd and leave it out by your door every October? Maybe some of you don't. I'm just going to assume that we'll just talk about some of the canonical holidays and the traditions that are associated therein. Why do you carve jack-o'-lanterns? Do you know? Maybe some of you do. Maybe some of you are now speaking to your computer screen and telling me where the jack-o'-lantern originated. I will go ahead and fill you in. It is an ancient Irish pagan tradition where they would carve rutabagas as a type of ward so that evil spirits would not come around during Samhain, which is the harvest festival that Halloween is based upon. A lot of people don't know that when they take their 5-year-old kid out dressed like Buzz Lightyear to get candy from a trunk, a stranger's trunk. But nevertheless, these holidays do have their origins in the past. Halloween itself is based on, it's All Saints Day and all that stuff is an appropriation, but a lot of the traditions that are associated with Halloween are based in much earlier pagan traditions. Including putting on a costume and the sort of the feasting and the wanton revelry and all that stuff. That's part of that holiday. It's an Irish holiday. It's called Samhain. It became, some of its traditions were appropriated into All Saints Day by the Catholic Church. And today, your child dresses up like Scooby-Doo and goes around asking neighbors for candy. So you can see there, it's exactly like the lottery. The tradition has become watered down. Nobody remembers the origins. Nobody knows why they do it, but they do it because, well, Halloween is kind of fun. Maybe you don't think so. There are also, I know this is a touchy subject for some people. There are also plenty of traditions associated with Christmas that you have no idea about the origins. For example, the Christmas tree. Now, the Christmas tree is something that we do every year, but what does that have to do with the birth of Jesus? Is there a tree in the story? Is there anything about hanging ornaments on a tree or anything? No, because it doesn't come from there. In fact, there are some verses in the Bible which you could argue explicitly forbid Christmas trees, and I'll let you do the Googling if you want to find that stuff for yourself. It could be an argument that it didn't really explicitly specify Christmas trees, but it sure sounds like it. So if that's something that they wouldn't do in the Judeo-Christian tradition, where does it come from? Well, the Christmas tree itself was brought by German immigrants, or was developed by German people. But it is based in a much earlier tradition called the Yule log. You may have remember the Christmas song where they say, "Toll the ancient Yuletide carol," and you just said that, you didn't think about it. What does Yule mean? Yule is the pagan winter solstice festival that preceded Christmas and from which many of the traditions regarding Christmas were derived. This includes the Christmas tree. It also includes the hanging of wreaths and laurels, which was also associated with Saturnalia. That's the Roman variation of the solstice holiday. Now, that's not to say that Christmas is the solstice, because it falls on a different day. But many of the traditions that come from these earlier holidays that were around the same time were borrowed and used in association with Christmas. There are plenty of things about Christmas that don't really align. Also, here's another thing: mistletoe. What's that got to do with anything? Mistletoe is actually a plant that is associated with fertility in many of these ancient European pagan cultures. That's why you kiss under it, right? Because it's a fertility sign, an herb that is associated with fertility. Actually, it's poisonous, so don't mess with it. But we hang it up and when you stand under it, the fertility magic is falling down on your head, so you got to kiss somebody, right? That's it. That's literally it. You can look it up. And there are tons of other stuff. Okay, what about Easter? Easter Sunday is the resurrection of Christ. So you hide eggs for children and you give them bunny rabbits made of chocolate, right? Makes perfect sense. I can hear your gears grinding. Where does that come from? What's the correlation? It may surprise you to know that there isn't one. The tradition of hiding eggs and the association of Easter time with eggs and rabbits is based on, again, an earlier pagan tradition, which celebrated the fertility goddess Aostra, sometimes called Ostara, and her feast day was around the spring equinox, just like Easter Sunday, although it's not exactly the same. It changes every year. Easter Sunday does. The equinox does not really. And so the association, it's not as though they are the same holiday. It's that the traditions from one were borrowed into the other, and then the other holiday was done away with entirely. So we have all of these residual pagan traditions. We didn't know, you didn't know, I assume, maybe some of you did. Most of you didn't know where they came from, yet you practice them, and you don't know why, right? Because my mom told me to, right? Because we used to do this when I was a kid. It's what we've always done. That's the exact logic that the people in the lottery use to justify a human sacrifice. So why then do we do this? Why do we go through our society participating in these habitual activities without questioning them? Has it ever occurred to you to ask the origins for some of these things? And that's not the only one. I could go on for a while. Valentine's Day is Lupercalia. Thanksgiving sort of paints a rosy picture of European and native relations in the United States of America, when in actuality it preceded a genocide, so that's not very good. St. Patrick wasn't Irish, he was French. There's lots of stuff that is just like things that we don't know, origins of stuff that we have no idea, and yet we just do it. We go through the motions. Why? Why? Why do you not ask yourself these questions? And if you have, good for you. I hope you've gotten some answers for them, but it should show you that we do have this weird sort of habitual tendency to just go with the norm, go with the flow. And if the norm is something terrible, that can be really bad. So the lottery shows us the danger of traditions and the danger of groupthink, of thinking as a group without using your individual mind. The character Tessie Hutchinson, who dies in the end, she knew that it was wrong, but not until the end, not until it befell her. So why is it that we suppress the individual in favor of groupthink, and we have these long-standing traditions that we don't even know why we do them? We just do them because, and it's become something that it wasn't, and all of these weird parallels between this story and our lives. So again, the lottery is a very impactful piece of literature. It's very important, and I hope that you have garnered something from this discussion, because I think if you start to think about it, there are all manner of things that we do and we don't know why. So that's all I've got to say about that. I hope you guys have a fantastic week. Please email me with any questions.